What does it take to be a successful entrepreneur? A dangerous amount of coffee and a ton of grit. My name is Jason Tracy, and every week I interview business leaders to share their stories, life lessons, failures, and advice with you. Welcome to Coffee and Grit. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Coffee and Grit. Super excited in the new studio. Got the fresh space. You know, I'm so used to, I was just telling Tom, our guest here, how I'm used to having the studio engineer and all that kind of stuff. And you know, you got to take a couple steps backwards sometimes in order to go forward. And I know the entrepreneurs out there, you understand me when I say that message. You've got to take those steps back. Sometimes it feels uncomfortable. You know, when me and Kevin, I was sharing the story, when Kevin brought me into this space and was like, "Hey, what do you think about creating our own content studio, our own space where we can make our own stuff?" I was like, "Yes, heck yes!" And then I'm like, driving home, I was like, "Oh man, I'm so used to this comfort zone of having somebody, you know, having the studio and having somebody there doing it for me." And so there's like this whole learning curve of putting everything together. But I'm telling you what, once you get it going, it is worth it. Just from my aspect, and you know, and I swear we'll get to Tom here in a minute. We have a difference maker in the studio today, and it's a great way to kick everything off. But it's sitting and being able to test all this stuff out. Me and Kevin, you know, Kevin Brown, referring to and bring everybody into the inside story. You've all heard them if you're an avid listener to Coffee and Grit. He's been on 3 episodes, and then he spun out and he did his own content, and it's super awesome through this. Just by doing a podcast, we've been able to take the clip and really hone this in. If you ever heard the phrase "riches in the niches," Tom just asked me, how did we get him to all of a sudden really catch on fire and build a huge following? You know, over almost 17,000 followers on TikTok. We're about to hit 2,000 followers on Instagram within a week, which has been awesome. And how are you doing it? And it's complete authenticity. It's your experiences and sharing your experiences and wanting to help, but it's also really understanding, dialing down who your people are and who you're talking to, because we can throw a bunch of stuff at the walls. We can speak to so many, and I know I've done that, where you're speaking to so many people, but when you really focus down and you start talking to a group of mechanics, a group of shop owners, for example, they're going to start narrowing in and deciding, is your stuff worth listening to? And that's what we have in Kevin. Kevin's a difference maker, and everybody's heard him on my content, which is spun off why he was able to spin off and do his own podcast, is because he's somebody out there that has made a difference and people want to listen to, which is awesome. But it's all about the practice, and it's so cool how good we get when we have an opportunity to just get in and be consistent. And for me, it's really cool in this last month as we've been setting everything up here, to see Kevin and how good he's gotten, to see how comfortable he's gotten. And we've been able to do really cool stuff like bring his team in here, and then to see how him and his team interact. I think that's another thing. And you can watch in interactions, because he's had posts where people have literally attacked him for his stuff and said, you know, you're probably a horrible boss. Nobody wants to work for you. And then, you know, just based off of some views he's had on how to manage and lead people. And then you see his team and you see that, like, the love and the camaraderie and the culture, it's not fake. You know, like, we can come on and we can pretend, but you can see just the energy in the room, just what we caught on camera, that it's not fake. And that's why he's getting so much credibility and it's growing. So just a shout out to that. And you know, and just again, what we're doing with this content studio and why it's worth it sometimes to take those couple steps backwards. So with that being said, and with that message, I'm super excited to have Tom Rivers in the studio here today. We met up, Steve Ziskowski, always connecting me with some really, really awesome difference makers. And we got to sit out, and we even got, you know, photo opt. We got advertised by BCAT, by Brighton Coffee House, sitting on the patio, and we sat out there and just had a really amazing conversation. And I'm like, you need to come on. Like, let's have you in the studio. And so I'm really excited that he's the first episode rolling out of here. So Tom, welcome to the studio.
Hey, thanks for having me. And we did have a great time over coffee, which we got that in common for sure. And I love your intro. There's nothing better than a startup. Figuring that out.
Just figuring it out, right?
Yeah.
And I know you've got some experience with startups.
Yeah. We're going to get into that. Absolutely. But when you were describing this new studio, having me come on, I was like, oh, cool. I get to see a startup. I'm going to be the first. And I love being the first at something, trying to figure something out and thinking through it. And yes, it's nerve-wracking, but it's also cool. Yeah. You know, it's like a wide open space to figure it out. And that's what I just heard you talking about in the intro. Yeah.
Well, and it's like its own new set of challenges. Like I like technology, but to say that I had all of this stuff figured out or knew, like there's a huge learning curve. ChatGPT is amazing. It's pretty cool. Like I could take pictures of the room and be like, "This is my setup. This is what I have," and it was literally tying everything together. And this is where I'm stuck at. What's going on? And then last week I had somebody come in that booked the studio, and they came out of my difference maker boot camp, and so they each get content that they get to make with me at the end of their boot camp. And she came in, we were all pumped up, and I couldn't get the cameras to work. Like and it's so funny. I found out afterwards that a Windows update on the laptop knocked out the USB-C port. And literally, my cameras are plugged in. I couldn't figure out. I'm unplugging everything. I'm doing all this stuff. Can't figure out what's going on because I just see nothing but black screen here.
Yeah.
She laughed. We're like figuring out things, and then we boiled it down like the Windows update.
Yes.
And so we had somebody, IT guy, fix the port. But it's just the stuff I could have spent hours on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there you go. There's a good example. When you're starting something up, you just don't know. It's not necessarily smooth. There's tangles. There's figuring out. It's not all smiles. Sometimes a little pain along the way. Like you're trying to unwind something or create something from scratch. And there's, again, nothing more exciting than what the opportunity is before you. And I think that's where entrepreneurs and visionaries have. They can see not quite the end game, but they know where they want to go, and the motivation to dig and shift and change. Even you making this big leap to come to the studio was an opening on a vision that you've had.
Yeah.
And even Kevin's story about not just the numbers, but what he's producing, the authenticity and all that. Again, that's part of your vision, and I just think that's what entrepreneurs love. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's that addictiveness to creation, things from scratch. You can maybe call it pride, but there's something that brews inside of us that wants to put out something different or new, or make a change, or have a vision just based on current situation. So yeah, hands off to you, man.
I'm sure you can resonate as a visionary. It's a blessing and a curse because I always have these ideas, and it's like, am I getting too far away?
Yeah.
And for the longest time, I was stuck on this podcast because I started the podcast in order to help brand and market myself. And you were telling me earlier before we started how you you're making these videos, and you have this process, and you're doing this thing.
Yep.
And I started that when I started my business. I'd start to try and make these videos. I'm like, I'm not loving doing this. You know, like there's not a lot of fun doing. But I was going and having these killer conversations out on patios at the BCAT, like what we had. And I'm like, in the meantime, these people are telling me incredible stories. They're telling me perseverance. I know that's a word that's important to you, and like perseverance and that grit and determination. And I'm learning so much from these people. I find myself, as I was having these conversations, I felt guilty going home and telling my wife about these conversations because she's working at this job that she hates. And I'm like, oh my God, I made no money today, but I had this amazing conversation.
I share the same stories with my wife. She's like, so you making progress? I think so. So we both chuckle. She was like, okay, keep making progress, Tom. I had a great coffee out on the Brighton Coffee back patio. By the way, I was on another little marketing piece by them too. So
nice.
Yeah, back to back with you. There's something about that. So anyways.
That is awesome. I do find the BCAT's the place you go when you want to run into people.
Yes. Yeah. Hey, I met more people there than I have anywhere else. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's one of those things, feeling guilty, having these conversations, and then I'm like, oh, this is like the way. What if I go buy a camera? Because what I found out is I'm having these conversations, people haven't shared these stories, and then there's also struggling getting content out. I'm like, oh, what if I help them and help me at the same time? Yeah. I can get myself out there, we can have these conversations. It's more that authentic. It's, it's not me just going and talking and rallying on a point because I wanted to, but it came up in a conversation or somebody's struggling with it, and we start, and now all of a sudden it's just an authentic conversation. It's not a sales conversation. It's not in capturing that. And then also they're telling their story, and we're diving in, and it's not stuff that you're normally getting when you pull out the camera and you start shooting yourself.
Yeah. I love that. And it is true. And almost on a similar journey, creating the content, whether they're co-written blogs or just social media posts. But once you get in front of a camera and you start to show yourself, I was nervous. The first, I doing these 2 minute little posts, and I was asking, some of my closest friends, including my wife, how's it come? Does it look okay? Do I look weird? Or do I? And they say, no, you look really corporate. I'm like, oh, I don't want to look corporate. And so I learned how to dial it in just to be a little more authentic, just talk about it, let's talk about the subject that I'm trying to get out there, but doing it in an authentic way and just be real. Just put the camera up there. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have the perfect setting. Don't have the perfect lighting. Although your lighting looks great here. But try to find a good background and all that. And so I migrated, learned over time how to communicate that well. So yeah, trial and error.
It's trial and error, and it's, to your point, you don't have to have the fancy cameras and the great lighting and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. You can really. I was showing clients, and I was doing before this came about. I was in this period of clients would want me to help them with their content because it's more about being comfortable and being able to get their authenticness out and also stay on task.
Yes.
And so I was just taking my phone and making videos in my office, and they were just videos on my phone, and I'm giving them to them, and they're hitting 3,000 or 4,000 views, and it's just the power of that story.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. By the way, for our listeners out there, I just downloaded Teleprompter, and you can write your own little script, and it can roll for you, and you're looking at your camera. So there's all these little technical things that kind of help along the way. So, but yeah, the key thing is getting out the message. People hear it, read it in different ways, and when they see you or me, and they can put a face and a name and body language, and they get a feel for you. You start to build trust with people. The more familiar you become with people and the words that you're using, and I think that's one of my goals. Why these little 2-minute videos is to get to see me. I'm a real person behind something I'm doing, and just trying to build not just familiarity with a brand, but familiarity with me because I'm similar to you, and that we've got that coaching world.
Yep.
Guidance, business guidance, etc. They want to really trust you. So again, that was kind of one of my goals, getting that content out there. Yeah.
Well, and it doesn't just supplement, you're still going out and meeting people and doing all the things, but there's only so many hours in the day.
Yes.
And so what that content does is it helps you be able to do that while you're in another meeting, or while you're hanging out with the family, or while you're sleeping.
Yes. I had somebody contact me. They said, I watched 8 of your videos in a row. I wanted to meet you.
Yes.
Yeah, I was like, oh, cool. It worked.
It worked. I love it when a plan comes together.
Awesome. It's got to get more people watching 8 in a row, or whatever the number is. So, but there's a lot you can do with that. So, yeah.
There is that does work. The power of video, because again, people can feel like they get a chance to know you in that guy, and that is a great example of I've watched every video and I want to get to know you. I want to meet you.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, cool. Well, hey man, this is awesome. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, it's my pleasure. Again, this I've been excited to have you out. We put it on the calendar, and I'm going to hold this off to be the first one. So.
Well, when we first met, of course, I didn't know what to expect. We just chatted an hour and a half later. We were enjoying it. But one of the first things I brought up was meeting you was the name of your podcast, Coffee and Grit, and I was like, wow, this is cool. The first thing we have in common is coffee, and I was born in New Orleans, and my mom was original New Orleans, right outside the French Quarter, pretty close to it, from a French heritage family. And why the coffee came up is because as a little kid, I remember sitting at my grandparents' house. We'd go over there all the time, and they would make cafe au lait, coffee and milk. And but the coffee that they would use was chicory coffee, or Café Du Monde brand, which is related to the French Quarter, the Café Du Monde French donuts and coffee. And I'd always get the little cup, about probably like an espresso cup, which back then was just a little cup, and it was half coffee and half milk. But the chicory coffee, I didn't really realize until fast forward, 20, 30 years later into my 30s, when I remember asking my mom, "Hey mom, where'd you get that coffee?" She goes, "Oh, that's from Café Du Monde, which is downtown New Orleans." And when we were talking, how chicory coffee, or in this case, it's a blend. You can get pure chicory coffee, or you can get coffee mixed with chicory, and Café Du Monde brand has that mixed coffee. And every time I go to a coffee place, I'm like, hey, have you guys ever heard of chicory coffee? And nobody's heard of chicory coffee. So here, I want to, on the podcast, start, how come coffee shops don't offer chicory blend coffee? And it is amazing. It's a chicory root that gets roasted just like coffee, and has this chocolatey, what they call woodsy, slight bitterness. Not really, no more bitter than a normal cup of coffee, but it's really rich in flavor. And I just think, hey, we got to get Brighton Coffee House to start offering up chicory coffee. Here we go. There's a plug for Brighton Coffee House. So that was our starting point. That whole thing, being from New Orleans, drinking chicory coffee, and that was my beginning years of between birth and 11 years old. Yeah.
And I'm disappointed because you said you're going to bring some chicory coffee for you to taste.
No,
because I had never heard of it.
Yes. Oh, well, don't worry. You're going to get a can.
Yeah.
I make chicory coffee cold brew, so I prefer the cold brew. I don't like the bitterness of coffee when you heat it up. You extract the oils and it gets bitter. But cold brew and chicory coffee cold brew, I make every day. Sometimes I make a huge can of it, and I can sip it for a week. But it is my go-to every morning. Again, chicory coffee is really rich in flavor, and it's a great thing to wake up to.
That's awesome.
And throughout the day. And the other benefit too, chicory is no caffeine in it. So it gets blended. You can have pure chicory, which there's many places that sell pure chicory coffee, or you can get the blend with regular coffee, and it's still like a third of the caffeine. So you don't necessarily get the over anxiety feel with caffeine.
So that's huge for me. People at decaf, they could get that coffee, get a good taste, but it's not just the decaf coffee.
Right. It's not just the decaf coffee. Yeah, it's the blend. So don't worry, I'll bring you a can.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And that's my original story. Just playing from my youth, which had a big influence with my parents. My mom being from New Orleans, my parents met down there. They got married down there, and then we moved to Michigan. My dad was in the auto business, so we came to Michigan when I was in third grade. I've got four siblings. I've got two older sisters and two younger brothers, so I'm the kid smashed in the middle. But we moved here and grew up in Bloomfield Hills, so up in Detroit area, and went to school in Bloomfield Hills, and just had a great childhood for really two reasons. My dad worked for Ford, really hardworking guy. At 10 years old, he's like, go cut lawns and make money. You can go push a lawnmower. And my mom, being a stay-at-home mom with 5 kids, just an amazing cook. And for some reason, I took to cooking, and I still don't know why, except my mom would say, I need you to chop these vegetables. And the thing about my mom is she grew up with an amazing mom, too, who cooked. And being from New Orleans, of course, my dad would say, you kids have no idea how good you're eating this New Orleans cuisine, Cajun food. And we thought, we didn't know any different. We didn't go to people's houses. We stayed at our own house, right?
Yeah.
So I grew up eating really well. My mom was an amazing cook, made her own cookbook, and from all these basically family recipes, and put them together. So I grew up learning how to cook, and became a little bit of a side passion of mine, which probably is a great topic to cover here, is if you had a food truck, what would it be?
Oh.
We'll get into this.
Yeah.
So I still love cooking. I love cooking my mom's recipes or anything else. As my wife will say, when are you going to fully retire so you can be the full-time chef? And maybe it'll come that day. Maybe that'll come the next, 5-10 years. I don't know yet. But the cooking part of it with my mom was just a love for watching the art of cooking and the flavors, and especially with New Orleans flavors or Cajun flavors. There is an art to that. So that became two things: working hard, cooking. And those are sort of my family years. I remember the best was just not being at home much, riding a bike around the neighborhood or working, and enjoyed both. And even with I talked to my mom, who's 88 years old. She's coming up at 89 years old.
Wow.
She's still cooking. And I'll tell her, hey, Mom, I made jambalaya, last night. And she's like, did you do it this way? Yep, did it that way. Or gumbo or anything else like that, So yeah, just a little bit of a history with me and love for coffee and food, especially that Southern food, that New Orleans food. So
that sounds like a really awesome childhood and some really awesome memories spent with your mom cooking.
Definitely. Matter of fact, there were times when, and I had restaurant jobs, so as I was getting from cutting grass to restaurant jobs, and she'd always say to me, you love doing this, you have a passion for it, and I do too, maybe we should start a restaurant together. And I'd be like, oh, Mom, that's a lot. Well, I don't know about that, Well, she went on, she didn't go to college, but she did go, and after the kids were out of school and out of home, she went back and got a culinary arts degree at I think Oakland Community College. And so she was always still trying to tell me, hey, when are we going to do a restaurant? When are we going to do a restaurant? I'm like, I don't know, Mom, about doing a restaurant, And I went into corporate life, which we'll get into in a moment. But when I still talk to her, I said to her the other day, hey, Mom, I was texting her, if I had a food truck that had 3 ingredients, what would you name it? And I said the 3 ingredients are jambalaya, family recipe, beignets, which are the French donuts from the French Quarter, and cafe and coffee and chicory coffee. Those are my only thing I would do. And I said, help me come up with a name. So we had a little fun back and forth, and of course, ChatGPT being our friend, you could design a logo just based on a name, right?
Yes.
So she'd put a name, and I'd throw it in ChatGPT, and I'd send it back to her. She's like, how do you draw that so fast? I'm like, too confusing, Mom. I'm a good artist really quickly.
I'm so good. It's the way my mind works.
So, anyways, we camped out on this for a little fun. It was me just engaged with my mom, who's almost 89 years old, and she liked Jambalaya Junction, with 3 things, and she's like, well, when are you going to do it now? I'm like, I don't know, Mom. I got too much going on. She's like, I still think you should start your own restaurant. So Steve, maybe there's a restaurant in the future and a food truck called Jambalaya Junction. I don't know.
It's what happens to the visionaries, right?
I know. See,
especially when you have multi talents or loves.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And I think there within lies just what we were talking about at the very beginning was the startup of ideas and the vision behind it, and it comes I think with a passion to get to an end result. And I'm very purpose driven. In a good way, it's a little bit of an addiction, like this, hey, I enjoy eating, but I eat really pretty healthy, and I'm not eating jambalaya every day for sure. But the whole idea of a passion behind me, my heritage, my family, what I love to do, and creating something, i.e., a little mini business out of it, I could easily do. That's the fun part of our addiction. And as my wife kind of rolls her eyes, oh, okay, sure, I do that. And I'm like, I don't know, this wouldn't be too hard, a little investment, and I'd have to make the food. It's not that hard, but anyways, yeah, a little dreaming, as you can tell, a little vision here.
It's fun, in food trucks can be really fun in the sense of some of the things you can do, and like you could even travel with it and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right. Lots of options around that. Yeah. Of doing it. And I've thought through it. I've stared at food trucks. We go to the Northville Winery, by the way, from Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, maybe even Saturday. They got live music and they have a food truck. And I think either each night, and I'd always tell my wife, hey, I can see my food truck, here. And she's like, okay, keep thinking about that. So, but hey, we'll maybe Steve, I'll be back on for talking about that.
Yeah.
Or Jason.
Yeah. No, it's funny you texted me that earlier too, and I'm like, I know Steve connected us. So
yeah, that's the problem. Yeah, but yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of a little bit of my upbringing. Went to school and went to Ferris State University. Got my marketing degree there. And my dad worked for Ford, and he's like, "Say, you do good at Ford." And I'm like, I'm not gonna follow my dad's footsteps. I'm not gonna do that. I applied. and they gave me a job.
So
So
next thing you know, you're at Ford.
yeah, well, it was an easy decision. I think it was February, and it's cold outside here in Michigan, and they offered me a job in Los Angeles, and I was like, beach, warm weather, heck yeah, I'll take that job. So yeah, I had a great career at Ford. Started in Los Angeles, between San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Phoenix. Working in sales and marketing, working with dealerships, learning how, sort of the soup to nuts of auto business. Really enjoyed it a lot. Fast forward after almost 12 years, they said, hey, we want you to move to Australia, and we want you to help us launch a whole bunch of vehicles over the next 4 years. And startup again, brand new idea around getting that thing going. I was like, heck yeah. So my wife and I, we met out in Los Angeles, got married. We had a daughter out in Los Angeles, moved to Australia, was there for almost 4 years, and we had our son over there. And that was fantastic, by the way, living in Australia. Made the best of friends, which we're still friends with. And what an amazing country.
Yeah,
Incredible.
it's a place I've always wanted to go. It seems like it'd be pretty, like
Incredible.
the people are incredible.
Incredible. Great culture, great people. And after 4 years, Ford's like, well, your time is up. You got two options. You can move to Bangkok, which that was their Asia Pacific headquarters, which we looked at doing. And or you can move to Dearborn. We got a great job for you there. And I would say that it was a fairly simple decision. When you're away from family for 4 years and distance, parents getting older, and my wife's mom had passed away when we were there. So we decided to move back to Dearborn, and from 2004 to 2007, had another couple of years there, and decided after almost 18 years, I really wanted to venture out and go lead something, again, go part of like a company that's growing in a different way, more of a smaller, mid-sized company. And there was a startup company out of New York City, wanted some marketing. They're a data marketing analytics company that were looking for automotive expertise. And they came along and kind of, recruited me. And I'm like, startup? Sure. Grow? Sure. You need experience? Sure. I'm your guy. And jumped into that. And that marketing analytics company was measuring e-commerce. How about that for an old term? E-commerce and TV advertising, and looking at audience measurement of how you combine those things together. And we got that company kind of going in the automotive space, which helped sell that company to the Nielsen company. And then from there that was a total 8 years. So it was head of SVP of accounts, automotive accounts globally. And we grew it to like 16 countries, this tools that we had. So that whole startup thing and growth thing was a bit of an addiction until, things slowed down, meaning I got bored. Let's go do something new. And then I jumped over to Harmon International, or their Harmon Automotive, which Harmon International, known for their audio systems like JBL, Harman Kardon, AKG, Mark Levinson, kind of scales up to
so many of the different speakers that are out in the marketplace today.
That's right. And all those brands are in cars. So they hired me to be the VP of marketing for their automotive division. And all the technology you see in cars, all the digitization, it's run by a box, basically. It's like the brains, called in airplanes, you hear about the white box. The same thing with the automotive. They were the big leader in all the digitization. And so, and that was like a startup. They really wanted somebody to help grow their business, create the brand, create different storytelling. So I went to Harmon Automotive for almost 9 years. And love that. There's a B2B, somewhat B2C, because you're working with automotive companies. So yeah, a little bit of my background. And I just loved starting up things. And I decided, my wife and I decided in October of 23, we're going to call it quits and take a break. And that's exactly what we did. And from there, just thought, we're just going to see, our faith came into play. We're Christians, and we just continued to pray and just wait and pause and see where God was going to show us what was next. And that's what led me to what I'm doing today, which is called C12. But I'm going to pause there and a little bit of my family. I've been married for 29 years. I got a daughter who's 25 and a son who's 22, and just had great. We're kind of at that tail end. We just moved our daughter to Nashville, and our son is, who knows where he's going to land, in Michigan or maybe somewhere else. But we're in that transition phase. But I started a new career, starting up with C12, which means Christian 12, which are CEO or business owner peer-to-peer advisory groups. And the corporation is down in San Antonio. I bought the franchise for Wayne, Washtenaw, Livingston counties, and I'm starting it up from scratch. And here I go again, Steve.
It's so awesome. And it kind of ties in, going back and making that leap from Ford and then going to a more startup company. What was that? What was that like? 'Cause you think about all the resources and the things that you have from a company like Ford, that they probably have everything.
Yeah.
And then going to a company that doesn't.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that when I moved from Ford US, of just learning the automotive business, to Ford Australia, Ford Australia would be like Ford US. They were their own entity, and I went there to just taking my skills and abilities, and I learned how to, let's say, run a mid-sized company. And so when I went from a sort of a bigger field down to something that was more like I get my arms around, I knew right then I had that experience to take on something new in a medium-sized way that fit kind of my skill set and what I really wanted to do. So the transition then outside of Ford into those other companies was not really a big leap for me. I would say that the common denominator about me is one boss tell me, Tom, you have a lot of problems. Confidence is not one of them. So I didn't really have fear of necessarily failure, but more motivation to really think through things. And I started to really enjoy the skill of designing strategies that I could implement well. And I started to learn how to do both those sides. You were talking about the earlier, the phrase you used about kind of digging into the details about something. And I began to learn how to design strategies that I could implement well. So two pieces of that pie. And that was very transferable from company to company. And so I really wasn't nervous about necessarily going from a big company that had all these resources. I actually found them way more energetic going to a smaller company that had a desire to do something from nothing and use the skill set that I had learned and sort of perfected over time. And so, yeah, I mean, I wasn't nervous. Was it hard at times? Absolutely. There's politics on one side of the fence and the other, and the corporate life and all that. So you're always going to deal with that. But I really wasn't nervous about it. I more enjoyed. I'm very much a goal-oriented end game person, visionary, and corralling the people and the expertise to get the job done is something I just really, really love to do. Yeah,
that's cool, because as you're talking, I'm like, I get fired up over that kind of stuff, and it's like that new opportunity in a company, an organization, a group of people that want to do something big and like change the world. They're doing something that from a smaller standpoint than a company that's been there.
Yes. Yeah. And, I had a great career at Ford, and I loved the products. I loved the people. I liked the people I worked around. I always found the joy in the people. Honestly, it's kind of my nature to look at it that way. But I also knew that I could make a bigger impact by going out and doing something where my skill set was going to come in all the time. And it at a big company, sometimes your job before you is something that you just have to endure. But if I really began utilizing my skills in different ways at different companies, that's where I found the most joy overall. And even if I fast forward going from Ford to the small research company was bought by the Nielsen company, big behemoth Nielsen company. Then I went to Harmon Automotive, and even what I'm doing now, C12, I'm taking all those skills, and even though I'm doing it myself right now, I'm starting it up. I'm having to deploy all of those same ideas. What's my strategy, and how am
Yeah.
I going to execute it? And so the end game for me, and because I designed a business plan in what I was going to do in this period of time and with what resources, my own investment, is putting together that plan is what I love to do. Now I'm out there doing it, like talking with you,
Yeah.
and again, the crosshairs between that's a brilliant strategy, but can you execute it well? I learned how to execute well from great people in my career that showed me how to do things well. As an example, when I was with the startup research company out of New York called IAG Research that was bought by Nielsen, I learned the how to measure. So effectiveness, efficiency, and effectiveness became our sort of key selling points at this company with marketers, and using data to track everything that you're going to do. Now, this isn't obvious, but I perfected that. I say perfected. I'd learned how to use data along the way in order to ensure that I was on the right path to success. So that's when you're implementing things, you just can't go throw things at the wall. You got to measure your progress. So I really zeroed in on that. And even what I'm doing now, fast forward to C12, I put measurements in place. Am I on track? Why aren't I on track? Is my strategy working or not? Et cetera. So I find it to be really, really, really quite enjoyable at this point, even though I'm not working for a big company. I'm doing my own thing. Holding myself accountable.
Well, and it's cool. It's like it's like the proof. People will say the proof is in the pudding, but are you eating your own pudding? And then and then you look, and I love how it went from Ford to a startup to your own small business, and those are all three completely different things. But that system and that strategy, that framework that you've had through your experience, all ties in everywhere. It's applicable everywhere.
It is, and similar to you're doing the coaching role. At the core of what I'm doing now, C12, Christian 12, are CEO or business owner peer-to-peer advisory groups. Well, I have got to coach them along. You have to learn, you have to come alongside them, showing them, talking with them what their challenges are, applying data, applying principles, the same stuff I would do in any other bigger company, but now they're running their own company. So I'm still having to deploy all that same type of thinking. And it's a joy. I just got to text this morning. One of the members said to me, "Hey, I need you to help me write this thing because I'm looking for a meeting with a potential donor. He works for a nonprofit company, and I need you to help me think through how to best approach this, potential donor." And I'm like, "Sure, let's think through it." Got on the phone with him. So, anyways, all these little things I'm doing now, right, which I would have done anyways with a company, and now I'm doing it one-on-one to help somebody else better their business. So in a way, I'm kind of flipped it on its head to help them improve their business, where before I was doing it to drive the business for the corporation. So just doing it in a different way. Yeah.
I love as we get into depth, and I'm sure we'll dive more and talk more about this, but how it's more than just even business, and it goes into your personal life. And I think of, like, we've talked and joked about visionaries and hard chargers and those driven people, and that's what our audience is those driven people that are difference makers, or looking for a way to make a difference in the world. Yeah. But then there's this superpower and a blessing, just like of being a visionary, but also it creates a lot of wreckage and havoc. And especially if you have an addiction to success, you have an addiction to building these things. Yeah. Not saying you per se, but I think everybody that's on that driven space, you don't realize that because it's a good thing. It feels like a good thing. Yeah. Yes. But then what's that carnage on the spouse? And I love when you're telling me how part of your intake is diving in and having in-depth conversations with the spouse to really understand what's that full picture.
Yeah. Great segue on.
I don't know if I drove past some things, but that stuck out to me.
No. Yeah. C12 is a faith-based, it's a Christian organization that helps business owners, CEOs, people who run their P&L, let's call it, how to grow their businesses. We want healthy businesses, operationally, financially, revenue, organizationally. And the other piece of that, being faith-based, is teaching them biblical leadership principles. So they're leading their people really well. I've had some great bosses, and I've had some not so good bosses.
Yep.
And so how do we take these business owners as example, and how do we apply biblical principles to their leadership, and then sort of coach them and then train their people same way. One of the tools we use to get there for awareness, they do a core business presentation once a year. And we do a deep dive. We interview their employees. It's called like a 360 interview. We've got a series of 10 questions. We sit face to face like this, and we do an interview with their employees to get feedback on their leadership. What's going well, what they need improvements on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's great. We compile that all together, give them the feedback. We then go to their spouse, and I bring my spouse along. So it's really my spouse talking to their spouse at this point, which is great. And it's just a little coffee chat, just like this, and we ask them a series of 10 questions or 12 questions about, their husband or wife feedback. How's their leadership at home? How's their marriage? Because we know our jobs can have a huge impact on our spouses.
Absolutely.
And so we compile the feedback, and having my wife there is great because, they can identify with each other. Well, and so we compile that, and then we share those results with the other board members. So this one member who's doing his core business presentation, he presents his whole business plan. I present the feedback to the rest of the board members, and it's great, open, authentic. Here's where your spouse is at, or here's where your employees are at. And that is a game changer for some of these men right now. We've got a lady who's coming on one of our boards, and her husband will go through it too. But it's a game changer in that, some of these things that we're not aware of as husbands, right? When we're just chasing after our businesses and we're putting all this effort into it, well, our spouses want the same degree of interaction and connectivity with us. Well, after the first interview we did with this one spouse, the first time my wife came along, I think it was maybe about 10 days later, my wife and I were chatting, and, date night or something. And she's like, I've really been thinking about all those questions that, you're asking these spouses. And I thought maybe this would be a good opportunity for me to answer some of those questions.
Ooh. Like, no, that's not how this works.
and, my wife's very graceful and nice. And she's like, what the answer that the one spouse was giving, I kind of feel, very similar. And I was like, like gulping moment, more purposeful communication, more asking me how things are going, because I ask these questions, you're out doing your thing, Tom, but, what about me, So it's a very humbling moment for me but I'm also very thankful that my wife actually turned to me and she's like, hey, I'm feeling this way. And so that created a whole awesome conversation between her and I, which will be ongoing, only because she gets to go to all the interviews, and there's another 8 interviews that are going to happen, right? So she gets to hear these all the time and reminds me, or I remind her, hey, how are we doing? And based on these questions. So it's two-way street here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm out there saying, hey, to these CEOs and business owners, hey, here's the process, here's the feedback, but I need to look at myself in the mirror too, and my wife has given me that great feedback. And
well, you can't literally hide from it. You're taking her with you. She's it's so awesome. She's having those conversations.
And you know what? I would say that it can be a little nerve-wracking for somebody to hear what their spouse has to say.
Yeah.
Are we in the middle of their marriage and conflict? Maybe this is going to stir up something. It's done in a really God-honoring way. The questions are awesome. We make the spouse feel comfortable. The feedback to the owner, But what I've seen so far, and the feedback from the business owners, because I do one-on-ones coaching with them too, in between all these meetings we do. they've really, really liked that we did this. And it actually set them on a new track of communicating with their wives differently that they never knew about. And, you know, even though we might be opening up a little bit of can of worms in a good way, you
Yeah.
know, I would say we're opening up communication. We're opening up maybe blind spots. I have them, you know, we have them as you know, spouses. And I'm thankful. I didn't expect my wife to say, "Hey, I have some of the same, you know, challenges with you on some of these questions." But again, my wife's done it in an honorable way. So I think it goes a
Yep.
two-way street here. So it's very, very cool. I just want to just backtrack too. Is, you know, you brought up earlier about our motivation, right? Our vision, and I mentioned I had a great upbringing. My dad was a hardworking guy. You know, he always wanted us to work. And that's a foundation, right? You can go out and do stuff. But as a kid, I always struggled in school. It was not my thing, you know. I was always a little bit slower. And I think over time, I realized like, hey, I'm not the smartest kid in the class, and even I was falling behind, and I was always feeling like I was struggling at school. I accelerated in sports; that was my outlet, and I accelerated in working. I'm like, you know, and that became a little bit of, I realized not until probably my 20s where, yeah, a little bit of, I would say, wounds sort of from being told, you know, you weren't the smartest kid, and,
Yeah.
you know,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you being reminded and all that, and a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. And maybe that's where this motivation came in for me around the word perseverance, which I've got tattooed on one arm. Is even though I'm not the smartest, but I can still think through things. I can still create things. I can still work hard, and that became a little bit of my mission, you know. And maybe it's just the way I believe how God's designed me, and these experiences I've had is, you know, when I put my mind to it, or I would say what God's given me, the skill set to think through things, like we were talking about earlier, probably comes from a little bit of motivation, being told, you know, you're not the smartest kid, but I'm like, I can figure this out. As I said, one boss said to me, you know, Tom, you got problems. Confidence is not one of them. You know, so yeah.
Where do you think that confidence came from? Because I know so many people struggle with that specific thing.
Yeah. I think what I started to see, you know, two things that probably verbal recognition from others about doing a great job. You know, so if I was, you know, I was caddying at Bloomfield Hills Country Club, and or you know, restaurant jobs or different jobs along the way, I would get that verbal recognition, like, man, you just did an amazing job at this, and it really had nothing to do with school.
Yeah.
You know, or being the smartest kid in the class, or in sports. I accelerated in sports, and you know, I could go on and on about that around playing tennis and football and baseball, and I accelerated in tennis. That was kind of my sport, and even into running and you know, racing bicycles and doing triathlons and etc. I found joy in performance and accelerating in that, and I would get verbal accolades from that. So I think that's probably the origin of it. But in the back of my mind, you know, whether subconsciously we're thinking, you know, I'm not going to let not knowing something hold me back. I'm going to go figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And, you know, now we have access to all kinds of information. So, of course, you know, I can still be, you know, academically smart about certain things, which I did do a lot of studying outside of college or school, but also working hard and trying to figure things out and not being afraid to dig in deep on certain things. So that's why the word perseverance for me has a two meaning. One is that one kind of coming from a past of maybe being told I couldn't do something.
Yeah. Yep.
And it also has related to my faith. And, you know, there was a point at a time when I was 29 years old where, you know, I was kind of living the party scene and just maybe not doing the most ethically things right. Let's say it that way, and kind of hit a wall. And that's when I did some really soul searching, and I had some colleague who came alongside me, and shared faith and shared that here's the biblical way of living life. And I began to do that, comparing and contrasting, and doing some deep soul searching around that. And even though I understood who Christ was, because my parents, we grew up in a Catholic home, and I understood it, but I just didn't really understand it. I mean, I understand the top level of it, but not the deep soul of it. And when I was 29 years old, and this colleague began to share the gospel with me, and that's when I began to really understand what Christ had done for me. So perseverance, there was two things about that. One was chasing after worldly things. But when I became a Christian, or I gave my life to Christ, because it's what he did for me, which died on a cross for me. And when I accepted that and understood that, I realized that I began to persevere with the things that he wanted me to do, what Christ wanted me to do. So I still look at my youth days as being amazing, as we were talking about earlier. Enjoyed them, working hard. And now I still have the same type of perseverance, running after things, but I have a Christ that is at the heart of it now. And that's exactly, fast forward to a little bit of C12, of that background, why C12 is very motivating for me. It combines business growth and faith growth. And those two things converged to me. I was 29 years old, and I just remained on that trajectory. And I'm there to help business owners, Christian business owners, or CEOs, or faith-based people grow their businesses. I love doing that. And their faith at the same time. And to me, that is the crosshairs of, what makes me me. And I have fun on both sides of that fence. I can sit there and have a conversation around, let's get into the weeds on financially what's happening, with your business. And then on the other side, pray with the person, the leader, of the business, because they're struggling over something. They can't figure out why they can't do something, and just looking for God's guidance in that. So those are those two things merge together for me.
And I want to take a break and point out these couple of things. The first is just taking the action. We're never going to know all the answers, and even to the point that, yes, there are so many resources. We can pretty much understand the answer, but I've seen people that get paralyzed because they found too much information, and now things start get conflicting, and they've wanted clarity, and now they've got too much, and now they're paralyzed. And in that meantime, you've already failed and picked yourself up and learned a lesson, or went out and succeeded and learned a lesson. And that you can't replace taking that action in the learning that you get out of that. Have you ever read the book The Alchemist?
Don't think so, but I know I've heard the book.
Okay, so awesome book. I highly recommend it. Okay. But I think you'll love it. And it's a lot of what we're talking about now. But they say in there that making a decision is just that. It's making a decision.
Yes.
You're now here, you made this decision, and that decision is going to lead you to a lot of a lot of new experiences. Some of those experiences are going to be great. Some of those experiences are going to be horrible. Yes. But that's all that is the decision. And through these experiences, you're going to get your perseverance. You're going to earn your grit, right? And it's all about how you frame that story.
Yes.
How are you framing that story in your head?
Yes.
And either this is something horribly that's happening to you, or you're being able to learn from it.
Yes.
The second thing, in the second observation there, to pick up right where I left off, is how all these experiences in your life and, really your purpose. When you come down to it, and I can. One of the key things when I talk about people that are difference makers, and one of the key things that how I classify them is it's things that you've experienced through your life, that have empowered you, or struggles that you've had, and somebody came along and helped you.
Yes,
you now found a way to help yourself, and you found a way to help other people.
Yes,
and now you're out living this purpose that God pulled you and put you and gave you these experiences throughout your life. And if you do it right, you find a way to then go out and help other people with those
Yes.
experiences. And that's exactly, as you're telling that story, I can see it really coming down to that.
Yeah.
Wow, look at you told this whole big long story, and then you get to this point and you're like, and then here I am now, and look at all the facets that's really touching.
Yeah. Yes, to all that. I had a lot of great bosses. I really, really did. I can only probably name maybe a couple that, I still learn from them. They just weren't my favorite. But they, bosses, mentors, leaders, in the church, that I'm a sponge, when it comes to that, and but taking their guidance from me, or their correcting me. I mean, who likes being corrected? I don't.
Yeah.
But you ultimately did take their advice and make those corrections, and do those things and learn from them, and I am extremely appreciative of all those people on my pathway through life, including my parents, and my dad. And you are right. It's taking the accumulation of those, and go back to what you were saying before about when there's one thing that, again, I'll go back to that statement. Tom has a lot of problems, but confidence isn't one of them. I just didn't have that fear of keep moving forward. I would take it, learn from it, and just move forward. The problem with that, sometimes people don't always follow. We're movers, and I'm a thinker and I'm a doer. I'm sort of more of that hyper side of moving forward on things, only because I can see the end game. But I would say along the way, I had awesome bosses that would say, "Keep going." I'll give you here's a great example. Without getting too much in the weeds on it, I got promoted, and was at Ford, got promoted. And it was kind of my first sort of managerial job where I was going to be running a fairly large project that was going to be launching. Yeah, another startup thing. Okay. And I had a boss that said to me, he was always super quiet, hard to get to know. And of course, I'm more of a people person, And I think it was in the first week of working for him, and I went into his office because I wanted to talk to him about something. I wanted a meeting with him.
Yeah.
And he said to me, "You got 5 minutes. And within the 5 minutes, you have to convince me that you don't know what you're doing." And I go, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah. If you can't figure it out, I want you to tell me what you can't figure out. And if you've already think you can do it, then just go do it. So every meeting with me, you can only have 5 minutes, and you have to tell me why you can't figure it out."
Wow.
Okay, so I remember thinking, wow, you really don't want to talk to me, right? That's what I was thinking in my head. I'm
Yep.
social, right?
Yep.
No, he was just giving me the confidence that he knew you didn't need to have a meeting. You can just move forward. And that moment was a defining moment for me on that 5 minutes. Now, of course, I would cheat and walk by my cubicle whenever. It's like, "Hey, I got a question for you." He goes, "You only got 5 minutes, that was a big defining moment for me about moving forward. And it also taught me two things. One was confidence in what I could do, think through things, put the roadmap, in place, work as a team. The second thing it did was I used that same tactic to people going forward.
Yep.
I learned how to empower really quickly, by switching that to where they were empowered. They didn't necessarily meet, if they really wanted to talk to me about something, I would give them the time.
Yeah.
But I'd still say the same questions. What do you need from me that you can't already do? If you really think it's a multi-million-dollar decision where you think it's going to fail, of course I want to know that, But I would just flip that back on them, and that's how I began to lead. and the leadership roles going forward, including the last company I was with, 120 people internationally in the marketing world, of them doing things. I wasn't babysitting them. They just had to get the results done, and all I cared about were the results. I care about them too. Don't get me wrong, but you know what I mean by that. But that the principle I learned from that one boss was a trajectory. I'm moving forward. Gave me that confidence to do things. And I don't really sweat the small things. Not everything's gonna be perfect. I'm a trial and error thinker. I kind of know, generally speaking, the gut of what's going to work and what's not going to work. But yeah, those are all great segue to learning about people and bosses and yourself. And I think I learned too that was a great example of this guy having confidence in me when maybe I was showing some self-doubt.
Yep.
And just flipping that on me, and at that point I was like, oh wow, man, did you say that the right way? Just go do it. I can, and the answer was yeah. Which was cool about that was the job before going to Australia, where I became my own person to launch these 4 vehicles in a really short period of time, and they were looking for somebody to be able to go do it. And I was like, wow, that was cool, So yeah.
That's so huge. And we never know what the leaders that come into our life and how they're going to impact us. And then it brings me to, there's this whole thing of being kind. Is it being kinder to give somebody the answer? Because if you're thinking about somebody in a leadership position, they feel bad not giving them the answer. I was just in my boot camp today. Somebody was talking about leading somebody, and when somebody on their team, they come to them for everything. Yeah. And they're like, oh, how do I do this? How do I do this? And she's like, it's the same thing every single day. Right. And it's like, what do you do? And she's like, I do it for them. Congratulations, they sold you.
Right.
They've gamed you. Yes. They're not dumb. They know when they have a problem, they can just come and you'll go and not even will you just explain it to them. You'll go do it for them.
Yeah, you're enabling them.
You're enabling them. Yeah. Versus, and I love how it's like you don't lack for confidence, but of course, because how do you gain confidence? And the best way to gain confidence is to go out and do.
Right.
And, we've talked about sports, but one of my favorite interviews with Michael Jordan, he's being interviewed by Ahmad Rashad. And Ahmad Rashad takes him through, they're going through and watching video from his whole career, and he's asking him about certain moments. And they get down to the end where Michael Jordan crosses up Byron Russell and shoots the game-winning shot to win the championship, right? And Ahmad Rashad was like, all right, take me through this, Michael. What do you, when you are here, what are you thinking? And Michael's like, thinking? He was like, if I would have been thinking, he's like, I would have dribbled the ball over into the corner. He was like, if I was thinking, I would have dribbled the ball off my foot, or I would have made the wrong move. He was like, something you gotta understand. He's like, going back to my rookie year, he was like, we would have these practices in there'd be this whole competition, and the winning team would get to do this, and the losing team would do this. And he was like, I'd get up. He's like, I'd get my team up, and we'd get a really big lead, and the coach would call a timeout and put me on the losing team. He's like, and that made me so mad. He was like, I couldn't figure out why he was doing that to me. Like, why is he doing this? And then he was like, I would go out, and he was like, and of course I'd come back. I'd play super hard, and we'd come back and we'd win the game. He was like, but what that taught me was I got to practice every day like I'm playing for the championship.
Wow.
Every practice that I'm in is like I'm playing for the championship. And so then when I step out on the court, when I'm in this moment, there's no thinking. Yeah. He was like, I know what my body is capable of doing. Wow. He's like, my body responds because I've put it in that position over and over and over again.
Wow.
In one, I love that because I didn't even mean to tell that, but it's like a correlation from your boss, you're the leader, your guy to the coach of Michael Jordan. That was like, sometimes we think people are picking on us, or they don't want to talk to us, but what are they really giving you? Right. They're giving you this gift to go out and get that confidence, to compete, to take yourself to another level.
Yes.
The right people do that.
Yes, that's right. Wow. I didn't know that Michael Jordan story. That's awesome. But yeah, it's how do you empower people? Because we all have different gifts, skills, abilities, experience. It's how you package that. And you know this well, you're just talking about it in your boot camp is, they have to see it themselves. And, we, as bosses, leaders, we got to show them and build that confidence in them because there's, I've had employees too, of course, where, they were lacking for various reasons. You had to tell them that. That's never a comfortable conversation. But at the same time, it was probably better for them to move on. And there's other people that just need the confidence to go do it, and you got to build into them.
Yeah.
There's difference.
Yep.
There's a difference between the two. So yeah, well,
I hated firing people. It was one of those things that for the longest time, at the beginning, I'd lose sleep. I'd have that anxiety, all that kind of stuff. And now, like in retrospect, all this time later, I've had so many people that have thanked me afterwards, like sent me messages years later and said thank you. And this just happened a couple months ago. I had this guy that was on my team, and this guy was just a straight up, like I could tell he was an entrepreneur. Like he just needed to go, like he was all over the place. He was a visionary. Like he'd always talk about owning these restaurants. However, he was not very good at sitting on the sales floor and doing sales for me. Love the kid. Had to end up firing him. So I fired this guy, and he, long story short, he ended up hiring me to coach him at one point later on, several years later. And a month ago or so, he posted this post. He's owned several restaurants across Michigan.
Wow.
And when he was in my store, there was this restaurant across the street in Ann Arbor on Main Street called the Raven Club. And he used to always talk about, one day I'm going to own that. One day I'm going to own that. And so he had this Facebook post about a month ago that said, I've talked about this for years. This dream come true. I have always said I was going to own the Raven Club. Well, today I'm the proud owner, and we're opening up the doors and blah, blah, blah. And like, I was like, dude, wow, man, incredible. Congratulations. Yes. That's so awesome. I like had this comment, and his response back was, thank you for firing me.
I was going to
say. So it was like, what is kind, like, what do you do really? Because really, he just needed a job, but that job was holding him back from what he really should have been doing. And did he have to go through some struggle? Did it just all of a sudden, did he become successful? No. Yeah. But he started doing the things that put him in the places that he needed to be.
Yeah, that's right. And you know what? And we're part of that process of getting them on their trajectory. I truly, truly believe that. The right person, the right seat, and the right bus, you know, and identifying that. And sometimes they're not right in the right seat, or they shouldn't even be on the bus.
Yeah.
And we're doing them a favor. I think there's what I learned, put into practice is God-honoring ways of communicating to people the bad news and or potentially the firing of somebody. And you can do that. You can still do it with care and grace and truth. You got to the facts down. You still have to do all those smart ways of doing it, but you can still do it respectfully. And I think if you do it respectfully, they take it well.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say it's not always easy on both sides of the fence. You were talking about being nervous and all that type of stuff, but you can still do it really well. And there's sort of the HR process, let's just call it that, you want to put, but you can still talk to people respectfully. You don't have to manipulate, you can still show grace, show mercy, and still point out those things, to them. And those are I had bosses along the way that actually did it that way. And I was cool with it, with them telling me, because they respected me along the way. It's one thing at C12, which means Christian 12, is, how do you lead well? We've had lots of conversations. This is one of probably the major topics. When we're a peer-to-peer advisory group, you've got owners, right, and CEOs sitting at the table together. C12, we deliver business content that helps them think about their business. It could be, revenue, financial, organizational, et cetera. And then we have ministry topics. Well, a lot of the topics that they're dealing with are people problems and how they grow their business. And then, when you've got, 12 of us sitting around the table pouring into one person who's having a challenge, especially on people's side, we get into, hey, how do you do this with grace and truth and love to the person? And sometimes the best decision is to let them go. And this just happened recently. And, the owner was struggling over it because he had such a heart for the person, which is great.
Yeah.
You want that. But at the same time, he is trying to run a business, and he knew that this is best for that person to gone. So, and even though it was hard, you can still do it really well. So, yeah.
What I learned at the end of the day, people don't want to go and suck at their job.
No,
and sometimes it's just not a good fit. I was working with salespeople, and not everybody's qualified to do that. And I think I can coach and train most people to become really good salespeople, but it doesn't. They got to get it, want it, and have the capacity for it. From the you got to want it. There's some things there, but that any personality I think can do it.
Yeah.
But if people are coming to their jobs and they know they're struggling, that's just taking down their self-worth and
That's
their
right.
energy.
That's right. And those steps of identifying, is it a skill challenge? Is it a personality? Is it conflict? Is it a passion thing? As boss, we got to kind of figure that out, help them figure it out. Because as you said, yeah, you're actually loving them well by telling them to move on if that's the case.
Absolutely.
Because you can tell they're not doing well. They're not doing well for a reason.
Yep.
And that's actually a good thing.
It is. Yeah.
It is a good thing for them. It's good for the company. It's good for the person, and you can do it super respectfully, which is it's really, really important.
I love it. And we were talking about earlier, and something you just said reminded me of it. So I'm glad it circled back. But thinking about, and we coach from a business aspect and talking about C12, and you're doing it from this business aspect. But how, and especially when you're bringing in the gospel, when you're bringing in the ministry piece of it, how does that impact people across all aspects of their life? Because to me, I think that the good coaching is going to impact you more than just whether it's in sales or business, or it should impact in that home leadership.
Yeah. So your question's around between home and business.
Yeah, how are you seeing that impact on from both home, business, from a whole person? Because I think we try to be business development.
That's right,
Tom. That's right, and then there's personal Tom and family Tom, and versus like how do you align all of that? And,
yeah. Wow, it's a great topic. This is the number one thing I want to try to break down those walls. God didn't create us just to have compartmentalization. He created us as one with our families and business. So that compartmentalization is a bit of a lie. This is why we do those interviews.
Yes.
Talking about earlier, right? And that you can do both well. You can still have a home. In your marriage and in your kids and your home, doesn't have to be second, and your business doesn't have to be dominant. So there's just kind of trust on both sides of going about doing this, and it's open communication with your spouse. It's open communication with your kids. It's not necessarily yes, you are running your business. Does your spouse really care about all the details of your business? I know my wife would sometimes yawn, my problems I was bringing to her. I mean, let's just be honest, and she's kind of like, okay, what about me now?
Yep,
right.
Yep.
So, teaching that you don't have to compartmentalize them. Let me say it this way: is when you try to compartmentalize them, I think you do yourself a disjustice around that, to making sure that your spouse and your kids' needs are being taken care of, and doing that well. You can still do all that, even though you might have as a business owner have a really busy job. You don't want to forgo the family life too, because you're kind of giving up the most important thing. So we teach how to do those two things well, kind of bridge those together. A little bit is. And I can look at myself in the mirror on this one. We talk about this. I'm very goal-oriented, very mission-oriented, and very outcome-driven. I have no problem getting up in the morning and going and doing something at work. But I can still take that same motivation. That's a blind spot for me, right? I can still take that same motivation and look at my spouse and my kids and apply it to them. Some of this is trust. We're trusting God to provide our business. If He's given it to us, we're going to trust that it's going to run well, not just by haphazardly letting it run well, but by managing it well and trusting. But at the same time, is caring for my spouse and my kids at equal as my business. And both of those have to have a purpose. And when I know for me, when I get out of balance with that, my spouse is the first one to say, hey, hold on, time out here. Things are imbalanced. Are you doing date night with your daughter? Are you, what are you doing with our son? And what are you doing with me? And so I kind of have to have a plan for that as well as my business side. Now, again, being honest, I definitely had imbalances. I worked for 3 big companies.
Yeah.
Global leadership role. I was traveling. I was doing things. Things were imbalanced. They really were. And when you're, there were times when I really had to purposely slow down or not take on more at work. which is sometimes hard to do. But I learned over time that not taking on more was really, really an important step for me through self-awareness of not accumulating more. Meaning, I mean, the bosses were like, "Hey, Tom, you're doing great. How about this project?" You know,
You're like, give it, bring it on.
of
Yeah.
course, I'd want to,
Yeah.
but I learned how to say no to that over time. So going back to the whole C12 on this balance is we do look at the whole person. We look at their marriage, we look at their fun and recreation, we look at their family, we look at their time with God. You know, what are they reading the Bible? Are they doing study and their time at church? And then we look at their business, and we create a balanced wheel. And those topics amongst all the peer-to-peers are they're hearing it live, right? So I'm giving an update on my family, I'm giving an update on my spouse, I'm giving an update on business, and the other peers are hearing it, and we're holding each other accountable. So the peer-to-peer advisory group isn't only about business; it's about me asking the questions about, hey, you said you're going to go on a date night with your wife. Did you do those things? You know, did you ask her about some of the questions that in the interview? Did you guys circle back together? So we are trying to create that balance. I look back. I hadn't heard of C12 up until middle of 2023 or something, and I remember thinking, "Wow, I've never heard of C12. That's a marketing problem I have as a classic marketer."
Yeah.
The second thing is like I'm somehow missing this great thing that I really need, which is being held accountable by other executives or business owners. And if I'd been part of a group, I think I would have been better overall. I mean, I can honestly say that. And what I'm seeing in the group is they're looking at each other, holding each other accountable to their spouses, their family, and their businesses. And I think that's really what's kind of cool, that you can do both. You have to really think through both. And I think the lie out there I've seen, again, because I kind of lived it myself, was that you just got to do your work thing, and your family might be somewhat second, but yeah, that's a big topic, man. I would say at the heart of that, Jason, is that's what I'm really chasing after. I really, having lived it, trying to get business leaders together to talk about their faith and their family and their business all at the same time and hold each other accountable. That is really my mission. And to talk about Christ in the workplace and not be afraid of talking about your faith in the workplace, or how do you lead biblically in the workplace. That is really what I really want to, my bigger picture goal. Is helping leaders do that. Only because I tried to do it by myself for such a long period of time. I was in men's Bible studies. Yes, I go to church, and I got some church leaders that would come alongside me. But to talk about all this together in one setting is quite amazing. And I think that's really my mission, is to really help businesses lead well like that.
When you say that, it's one of those things that gives me the like the shivers, in a way, because it's like you're impacting these business leaders in a way that's changing the way they're interacting with their people, clients, and employees, their family. At the beginning of the show, I was talking about kind of the riches and the niches, and just really focusing in and not trying to serve everybody. And that's what I love about C12 too, is it's not trying to serve everybody.
No.
You're looking for specific people, because then it's then taking them to that next level.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, it is a great outcome of would you say the niches?
Yes, riches and the niches.
The riches and the niches. Love that, right? Go back to those spouse interviews. When my wife is there, which she is there, each one of them, in every situation so far, those spouses have said, can we start a group amongst ourselves with my wife, just like a little bit of a mini coaching feedback and just supporting each other? And there is a great example of the riches and the niches. That my wife was like, oh, this would be kind of cool. I'd love to just to get together with them once a month, where we invite them all over for coffee. We do something at the house, we just do, and it's not a complaining session. Yeah, it's a supporting session, right? And and that's what what they're looking for with other, ladies. So there's a great example of where we're going now. And that just brings pure joy to my heart to see that, to see that interaction at that deeper level. So yes.
Well, and I think it's a testimony to the things that you're doing, right? When the spouses are like, "Hey, can we form our own group?
Yeah. Yeah,
Can we bring this over and do this for ourselves?"
Yeah. It's cool. It's really cool. And kids too, they're going to talk about kids and raising kids and all that stuff. How did you do it? How did you and Tom do it? And all that will play out. My wife is just amazing, just graceful wisdom, just really solid, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. This is a nice little rich and niche. I'm going to tell her that riches and niches, that she would love. But she's very good at that too with spouses. So that's her gifting. Come alongside them. So yeah.
That's awesome. And I love the whole like riches and the niches conversation, because it's like a psychological within our physiology of why that works. In, there's so many things going on right now, so many things happening like right at this very moment that our minds can't pull in and process all of those things. And so our minds do three things. One of three things: they delete, distort, or generalize information. So either we delete it, like that Volkswagen Bug that drives by every day. We don't play the game with our spouse and where we hit them back and forth when things. So if I'm not focusing on it, that drives by me every day. My mind just deletes that. There's no importance to it, right? Yeah. Generalize, like, oh, Tom, you're kind of like that. My friend Brian, and you guys are very similar. So I start putting people in boxes, and so you're thinking about how the way that we, or we distort, like. We delete chunks of the conversation to distort it, and now we remember it a certain way. And our friends that were there are like, that didn't happen, or like, oh, but yeah, then this happened. You don't remember that? So our minds are doing one of those three things, and we have in our physiology the reticular activation system.
Yes.
Little spot back here at the spinal cord, and that is what tells us what's important. So it's like the algorithm on Facebook or social media or wherever. It's like when we start looking up things on Google and all of a sudden it's following us all around. We have that inside of our human brains that filter controls what we see is important. And I say that all to explain and how this works in like riches and the niches is because I work with a lot of the, startup entrepreneurs that are like, I can help everybody,
Right.
Oh, I'm in insurance. I can, everybody with a car is my, I've had chiropractor clients, everybody with a spine. Well, great. Tell me a story about yourself, and why did you get into chiropractic care? Yeah. Well, when I was a young athlete in high school, my mom had me come to the chiropractor because, she was going to the chiropractor, and I thought, I'm a young athlete, I don't really need to go, but I figured I'd go anyways. And then I found out that I had MS. And if I wouldn't have went to the chiropractor, that would have developed, and it would have been a completely different story than where I'm at now. But because I went there, I was able to blah, blah, blah. And then I was able to still perform and be a high level athlete and all this. And that's my story. Wow. What if your story with your high school athletes?
Zoom in.
Now let's zoom in.
Yeah.
Because now you can tell specific stories around, and when you're telling that story, now you're relating. And if I'm telling you, like, I really have a passion for helping young athletes because this happened to me, and how many young athletes are out there, they don't know that they've got something going on. I'm very passionate about making sure that they stay and live healthy lives where they can still be athletic when they're long into their 40s, 50s.
Yes. Love it.
Now you're out and you're talking to somebody that has their son's like, oh yeah, my son is having back pain, blah, blah, blah. You know what? I need to, and that's how it all works and how we like filter in, but we've got to be specific.
That's right. You have to be, we call that ideal customer profile in the marketing world, right?
Yes.
Actually we just went through this whole thing with our members, like, cause they all own businesses, who's your ideal customer profile? They were all over the map until we got them zeroed in. I love that. But to your point, it is knowing your target audience. It is knowing, it is knowing why they're your target audience. It's knowing your why, and I think you nailed it when you're talking about that example of the chiropractor and your why. Your why and your story, your why is who you're most passionate about and talking about, and I love that. It's clear what my why is, because it's part of my story, someone shared Christ with me in the marketplace, changed my life, and I happen to love business. So the workplace
Yeah.
is my area, and I want business owners because they have the greatest impact on their people. So it is niche, and but then again, it's not, because I see in the 3 counties, Wayne, Washtenaw, Livingston County, my target audience, there's about 1,000 people in my target audience. So I got this
Wow.
because we were talking about earlier about metrics, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's 1,000 opportunities out there between the 3 counties.
It seems like there's more, but that's interesting.
Well, I think in the 3 counties there were 6,300 businesses, and applying some logic behind that around the 1,000 opportunities is looking at what percent of those are roughly 1.5 million in revenue plus, and roughly 5 employees plus. That's kind of the baseline. And then you're overlaying. There's a company we use that overlays how many Christian leaders, and so it kind of comes out to be about 1,000. Which, when you kind of do that math, that's a lot, right?
Yep.
So,
yeah, definitely.
But the opportunity of people saying yes then is what you're kind of going after, which is, well, for me, my goal is to have 100 members and groups of 12 between the 3 counties. And so doing all that pre-work, my target audience, I know exactly who my target audience is and how to speak to those target audience and how to write messages to those target audiences, just to get a conversation going. But not to get off on a tangent, but that's a really important. My why, and my story is easy to tell, because it isn't all roses, per se, but it does include my faith and my journey, faith and my business, and my performance and my struggles, and my end game. I mean, I'm as motivated. And I had somebody say to me, this is not too long ago, person said, "You are all in if I'm in." I'm like, exactly. Like, you're getting me, when you're at the table, I'm gonna do everything possible to get you to where you want to go, because it's just my character, But I have to be kind of careful because I don't own their business, so But I love going back to that story. You were just talking about the chiropractor. Is you're all in then, and then you're dedicated to what I think God's maybe even called us to do. It makes it even more clear for us.
Yep.
I mean, I know what your why is.
Yeah.
We've had the conversation around that, and I can see it coming out, So it's kind of cool when you're dialed in on your getting the marketing speak of, ideal customer profile, So, yeah.
And it's marketing speak, but it is so important to really have an understanding. And I see so many entrepreneurs that come into the space that they are scared to limit it. They're scared to say, I work with the specific niche of people, because then, well, what about, Bob over here? He's not a Christian, but he's a business owner and blah, blah, blah. Well,
Yeah.
Am I going to lose this money if I don't do this? And what I see is that, going back to whether it's Kevin, when you can specifically, you're trying to find a specific person.
Yeah.
And when you're speaking to them, it's just easier to find that person than, again, throwing it against the wall. Now, I'm not saying your business is a little bit different. Some people can still take that one off, and they can still, but they're not advertising for it.
Right.
They're not going out and seeking that.
Right.
They could still go do that other one-off thing, but they're not actively pursuing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. It is hard. You can see the struggle of some of these business owners around narrowing it down. But the more that you kind of refine it, in the why is when you look at when you're going to go say something to the marketplace, a message, content, whatever you want to create, you kind of almost have to say, okay, look, if you're going to create something, what are you going to write to this general audience? That you're all things to all people, and then
what is that? Yeah,
it means nothing.
Yeah,
right. But if you're there to, like in our cases, equip Christian business owners to grow their business and to advance the gospel, through their leadership, That's what I'm saying. I'm just doing a different content in different ways.
Yep.
But when you start in the end result and you're saying, hey, look, if you were to create content, who are you going to write there? They start to refine their ideal customer profile and who they're going after. And it is a little bit of a skill, and it does take time and patience. My biggest advice I tell the business owners is don't sit there and do it in a vacuum. Don't even take on the exercise yourself. Here's the 4 questions. We give them the 4 questions. Pick 5 people on your team, 4 people on your team, have them go figure it out because they're the ones talking to the customer.
Yeah.
And come back with a narrowed down, give them 3 or 4 choices. And really what they find is their people know exactly who they're talking to.
Yeah.
Right? Because
Yeah.
sometimes business owners, we're running it. You're running it, and you're like, oh, well,
You think you know, but
yeah, you don't. Yeah, you don't. I mean, in some cases you do, but let your people do that too. They tend to know. They're talking with them every single day. I had one business owner that we did this, and he was awesome. He got it. He got it really fast. It came down to 4 companies he wants to work with. I won't even tell you about the business. He's from Brighton, though. Really cool dude. He'll be on the podcast
That's
one day
super awesome.
if we
I'm
do
excited.
if we do this, right?
Yeah.
4 companies he wants to work with. And we used, of course, ChatGPT helped us like narrow it down. And I was like, bam. You just need to go meet 4 owners over and over and over and over again.
And when you're so specific, how do you find them? It's probably easier to find them when you know exactly what you're looking for.
Yes, it's way easier. Yeah, so that's a whole marketing thing we can probably get into around the tactics around that. But I know exactly what my target customer is, and we created that profile, and I'm finding them. I've written the messages on how to find them, and I can go on and on about that marketing thing.
Well, and it's one of those things that's really easy. And again, we talk about how we program the people that we talk to, and when you're telling your stories and you're talking about where you're all about, for me, it was like, I need to introduce you to Robert Pierce,
Yes.
like there's probably a few people, but Robert Pierce, like he just is like screaming in my head, I need to connect you to, and then I connected you, and then a few weeks later, I think it was just last week or the week before, I get this awesome message from Robert thanking me for connecting you to, and and how it's just been, and I'm like, that's exactly how I felt it was going to turn out, and so I'm glad.
Yeah, and that turned into another meeting with another group of SiriusNet, people, and so then Robert and I.
But the thing is he's niched down. His SiriusNet group is niched down to your specific. And he's the only person out there in SiriusNet saying like, this is you don't have to be, but no. I think that because that's what he's looking for. That's what he's drawing.
Yeah. He's got 2 groups, right? So he's got the Christian group, and the others 2 are a combination of the both there. And I met somebody else too recently. SiriusNet guy, I got to mention him, John Manweiler.
Oh, John, man, I love John.
Right?
Yeah,
great. We're having coffee again. We hit it off. Same thing. So yeah.
John's been on the show twice.
He
was episode number 10.
What?
So he was all the way episode number 10, and then I had him and his wife Hannah on.
Okay.
Probably about 4 or 5 months ago.
Yep.
And so it was really cool because I did this. I interviewed him right at the beginning of 2020, right before COVID. Yeah, right before COVID. And he was talking about there's a girlfriend that he met, and like now they're married and have kids, and just retrospective, like all the things. But John is a difference maker. He is an amazing human.
Yeah. Oh, great guys. So we've had excellent conversations, and there's more too that's come out of all this.
Have you met Connor Messina?
Have not.
Okay. Connor's in John's groups too. I think he's another guy you need to meet.
Okay. I'm presenting to John's group next week.
Awesome. So you'll meet Connor there. I've met him there a couple times.
Okay. Yeah.
And he was on the show too, but awesome guy.
Wow. Very cool. Yeah. This thread that we're talking about around, perseverance, is, like we were talking about, just get up and move forward. Sometimes it's hard for people, and they need somebody to encourage them along the way, especially as small business owners. The struggles of the day to day, and I know as a coach you see that, but having someone come alongside is really important. Just having the conversation, getting things on the table, whatever they're afraid of, whatever's in their way, and helping them think through that. Sometimes they just got to lean lean on another business person, like yourself or myself, and there's joy in that. But that perseverance comes with not just doing it yourself. Is my point. A lot of times we're led to believe like I just got to struggle through
Hmm.
something, or I don't know what the outcome's going to be. But again, that's just a big fat lie. You can still reach out to people and help you think through it. Um, and perseverance, on a faith basis. I've done it by myself and did a lot of things probably not right, but when faith comes into play, God helps us through all those struggles, and that's a real thing for me. It's a daily thing for me, um, and I got the greatest blessing. We moved our daughter to Nashville, and for Father's Day, she wrote me a really nice card and just said, "Dad, you've showed me how to live your faith out, and every morning, get up and work hard and live your faith out." And it was just this moment of like, that's what perseverance looks like, you know. Um, it filled my tank for sure,
Yeah.
but to pass that along to somebody else, and doing it with others, is an amazing journey. So these listeners, whoever's going to hear this, is don't do it by yourself. Partner up with somebody else on the journey, like yourself or anyone to help you. If you're a small business owner and you just need conversation and talk about certain stuff, and don't do it yourself.
Well, and it's really cool when you can find a group and you can find people that want to have walked through your shoes and they walk through similar shoes, but then have the same values.
Yeah. Yes. That's right, and I think that's it can sound super niche and maybe not for everybody, when we're talking, but I think it's important that um, how Christ changed my life so much that my reliance upon Him is something I cannot separate, and um, that is my strength every day, because there's things that are happening that I don't even know that they're happening, and I'm just walking by faith. And I can go back even before C12. I mean, since I was 29 years old and through my 30s, and just things happening. It's not all about business, but about family and marriage and impact on others. Yeah, we do share those things in common. But he gives me strength that I sometimes don't even know. It's not of my own on my own power, my own works. I am getting up. Choosing every day to follow Christ. But there's things that are happening, and I just find pure joy in just watching them happen. It's just amazing to me. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah.
So,
Um, it's like that calling.
yeah, it is a calling. Yeah, yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
And this has been awesome. This has been such a cool conversation. I know we can a little bit, and we talked about perseverance here, and I want to talk about this because you said I have it tattooed, and
Yeah.
what is that? You started talking about how you earn perseverance, or what was that?
Yeah. So the word perseverance for me kind of it I was chasing after sort of worldly things, and my own strength and my own ambition and my own this and my own that, and I call that perseverance question mark, which is the tattoo, and then the second word, perseverance period, is once I became a Christian, that perseverance period is I'm following what Christ wants me to do. I'm persevering after the things He wants me to do. So I'm laser focused on that, and that's the Bible verse, Hebrews 12:1, which says, um, because we have such a great cloud of witnesses, like Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, etc. Those clouds of witnesses, we can look at them as heroes in the Bible. And it goes on to say, throw off everything that hinders us or sin that entangles us, and to run with perseverance by fixing our eyes on Jesus Christ, the author and the perfecter of our faith. So that perseverance for me is focusing on Christ to show me how to navigate the daily life. and the daily things. Whereas before I was just doing it on my own. And so that's perseverance, really what it means. So it's chasing after worldly things or what Christ wants me to do. And I have just great peace about that. Now, the cool thing about this tattoo on one arm in 2018, the company I was with before, there's a little story around this tattoo, how I got it. All right. So this word has always been, I've always had that word in my mind, persevering after that, of things. But the company I was with, we bought a cybersecurity company in Israel, which was an automotive cybersecurity company. And I was told to go over there and bring this company, integrate them, learn about their products, integrate those into a marketing plan, et cetera. So I took my marketing team over to Israel. It was 2018. And I told them, I said, hey, if you, I'm gonna go over there 2 days early, like get there on a Friday. Saturday, I'll pay for a private tour of the city of Jerusalem, the old city of Jerusalem. And I said, if you want to get there early, I'll pay for it. I'm going, so I'm already paying for the day. It's going to be me, or you can join. So they came. So I had 5 of my team members come, my leaders around the world, and the tour guide, private tour guide, the first thing he said is, hey, down this alleyway, there's the oldest tattoo place in the world. I'm like, what? I said, what do you mean by that? And he goes, yeah, they've been around since 1300. The same family
what?
That came from Egypt, became Christians, and migrated to Israel. And they started this tattoo place in 1300. It's called Razuk Tattoo. And the same family members have been tattoo artists. They would mark Christians on their pilgrimage to Israel. And they would give them different markings. Well, over the 700 plus years now, they would create stamps. And some stamps were very intricate stamps. Other ones were very simple crosses, or, a dove or something like that. So they have all these history of all these stamps. Okay. So going back to this tour guide is down this alleyway, tattoo place. I'm asking these questions and all that. And 8-hour tour goes by. And at the very end, I go, hey, where's that tattoo place? And he's like, you want to go? And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, I want to go.
And it's like 5:00, or something like that, because they might be closed. So I go there, and they were still open. And I walk in, I'm like, I want a tattoo. So I got this tattoo called Perseverance, and in 2018.
Did you have that on your mind, or did they have that there kind of as an example?
It was on my mind. And then he said, we don't have it, we had to type it on a computer, and he did the, blah, 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 and the placement and all that, and did the rest of it. Okay, so fast forward to 2023. My wife and 2 other couples, we had planned this trip to go to Israel to do a tour. So it was semi-private, small bus tour. There was going to be 6 of us, and then some other couples we were meeting up with. We didn't know who they were, but this tour company. So October 2nd, we land of 2023. And we spent like 2 days kind of hanging out, and then the tour started. And I had made an appointment because on my left arm is a tattoo design that I wanted to get, but they didn't have time to do it in 2018. So in 2023, October 2nd. So I had made an appointment after our tour, so call it October 10th or whatever it was, or October 12th, I can't remember, something like that. And so we're 2 days into 3 days into our trip, and the war broke out.
Oh.
So we were over there when we were just on the northern side. We're kind of near the Jordan River, and the tour guide's like, hey, there's our not so friendly neighbors are shooting rockets, We'll keep going with the tour, but we got to monitor this. And I had been over there several times on business, and that would happen. They're like, hey, just stay in your hotel room until this all calms down. So as we continued down the Jordan River, heading south into the Dead Sea, and we're going to be doing all these little stops along the way. We get back on the bus, and they're like, hey, this is getting really bad. We need to cancel the trip, but we need to take you to the Dead Sea. It's the safest place for you guys right now. Well, in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to get the tattoo.
Yeah.
Right. I want it.
Yeah.
And
it's a wartime.
It's
Man, I'm not going to get my
right?
tattoo.
Okay. So then we're at the Dead Sea. Make a long story short, it took us a couple days. They said, hey, we have to go back into the city of Jerusalem. Other tour companies are going to be coming there. And, then we're going to tell you what's going to happen. So we go back to the old city. We're in the hotel. And I said to my wife, I want to go get the tattoo. She's like, are you out of your mind? There's a war going on here. So my buddy, who's with me, I'm like, hey,
we're going to get the tattoo.
The tattoo place is just a half a mile. Let's just take an Uber. And he's looking at me like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, I'm getting the tattoo. Right. So on the other arm, so I call up the tattoo place, Razuk Tattoo, and I'm like, hey, are you guys open? He goes, yeah, the owner is sitting outside. He goes, yeah, I'm just sitting outside having a cigar. What else are you going to do? Right. They're used to this in Israel. Right. So I we get into a cab, half a mile, go in. He's sitting outside. I'm the only person in there, tattoo. I told him the one I want. And this is a 500-year-old tattoo, which took out the original stamp. They dip it in ink just like that. They place it on, and then they do the rest of it, modern day tattooing, right, and artistry. Well, they've been in the same place since 1300, which is like a cave in the old city of Jerusalem. We can't hear anything that's going on. Well, there's sirens going off. And so we finished the tattoo. It takes like an hour to do. And we're like, oh, this is awesome. And then my buddy's phone's ringing, and it's my wife going, okay, she's crying because we're down in a bunker at the bottom of a hotel room, or a hotel, in the bottom of the hotel in a bunker. And she's like, are you guys safe? And he's like, yeah, we're fine. We're not hearing anything. So then we of course we walk back half, like, let's just walk back. Like, what's wrong? This is my problem. Tom has a lot of problems. Confidence isn't that one of them.
No problem.
Like the end in mind here. So I get the tattoo. And then, of course, we have to leave the country, which I won't go into that story because we're out of time here. But I guess I bring this up, the tattoo, for two reasons here. One, this just reminds me of, I think, how God has truly designed me to not necessarily be afraid but to continue to pursue him through perseverance. This is the right side. And the left side is just the remembrance of what Christ is and his resurrection. And this is the tattoo of a resurrection of Christ coming out of the grave, defeating death, coming out of the grave. And at the top is, the Bible talks about the Holy Spirit fell on Christ. And this is the book of John. And at the very top is the church is born. So, it was Christ who rose from the dead. And the church was born because of that. Christianity was born because of that. And this is just a reminder of the story of Christ. So this is sort of near and dear to me. And how it came about is also like, of course it's through perseverance. I'm going to go get a tattoo in the middle of a war. And my wife, she still looks at me like, what is wrong with you? But I got great memories from it. I'm glad we did it. So the problem is our tour got cut short, and now with everything kind of going on in the world we're talking about, we're not going back anytime soon.
We're probably, Oh, yeah.
We were thinking about going back next year because things come, but we'll see how it goes. But anyways, sorry for the long.
Hopefully everything has calmed down. But yeah. Man, I am so glad I asked that question before we ended it, because that was an awesome story. That was so cool.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I love it. So yeah, part of my journey. I'm wearing it.
You can't remove. You could, but that's a lot of work. That's so cool. Yeah. I love it. I didn't know what it was, so I love that story and knowing now what it's all about.
Yeah, I'll share pictures at some point.
That's so cool.
Thanks,
Tom. This has been awesome, man. This is a 2-hour conversation that just blasted through. Right?
Awesome.
It doesn't even feel like that, right?
And we haven't had coffee yet.
And we haven't even had a coffee yet. This is man. Thank you again so much. I'm glad that you're the first guy to come in the studio to do the podcast, and I'm super excited to get this out. And
thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
It's been a blast. I really enjoy it, and just the dialogue and the transparency and openness. So I appreciate your heart for the whole thing. It's just amazing. I really mean that. So yeah, cool.
My absolute pleasure.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Jason. All right.
Get up, get out, let your roar be known. Entrepreneur swagger, this is your throne. Afraid to be vulnerable, nah, that's your goal. The real stories where the truth gets sold. No more playing small, no more self-doubt. You're a face-eating legend, let it all come out. Grab your values, your vision, your mission, your pace. You're the game changer now, time to own your space. Raw Consulting, yeah, they're lighting the spark, turning wannabe dreams into works of art. So step up, show up, let your power be seen. You're the best version now, go live that dream. Roar loud, be proud, it's your time to rise. Your authentic self is your best disguise. Change your mind, change the game, break free of the shell. Cause hell's just seeing who you could have been. Oh well, oh well. Get up, get out, let your roar be known. Entrepreneur swagger, this is your throne. Afraid to be vulnerable, nah, that's your goal. The real stories where the truth gets sold. No more playing small, no more self-doubt. You're a face-eating legend, let it all come out. Grab your values, your vision, your mission, your pace. You're the game changer now, time to own your space. Yeah, Raw Consulting, yeah, they're lighting the spark, turning wannabe dreams into works of art. So step up, show up, let your power be seen. You're the best version now, go live that dream.